Kevin Wiegand's breath hitched as he pressed his back against the kitchen counter, his arm marked by a series of thin, bright cuts, 12 of them, each one shallow but unmistakable. Drops of red dotted the white tile floor like scattered punctuation marks from a sentence neither he nor his wife ever meant to write. Judge Carrie Bergnam III stood in front of him, chest rising and falling as if her lungs had forgotten how to function. The small decorative knife slipped from her trembling hand and clattered onto the tile. The metallic ring of it struck the room harder than any shout could have. Kevin, I didn't," her voice cracked. "I didn't mean—" He winced, not from pain but from shock as he clutched his forearm. The faint scent of iron mixed with the lemon cleaner still lingering in the air. The kitchen felt too bright, too still, as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for someone, anyone, to make sense of what had just happened. Kari stepped backward until her shoulder hit the wall. Her courtroom composure, the very thing that made her a pillar in New York's justice system, was nowhere to be found. Her hands hovered in front of her face as though she still couldn't understand how they had done what they'd done. And you, watching this moment, you might already be asking the same question everyone else asked. How does a respected judge reach a moment like this? Kari stared at Kevin as if he were both the man she loved and a stranger she couldn't quite recognize. Her pulse thudded in her ears, drowning out everything except the faint drip of blood trailing down his arm. Those thin lines, so small yet so powerful, felt like the border between the life they once shared and the chaos they had just crossed into. Her knees weakened. She pressed a hand to the counter to steady herself, fingertips brushing a puddle of cold water left beside a cooking pot Kevin had abandoned minutes before. The details she normally ignored suddenly felt exaggerated. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft clink of Kevin's bracelet as he shifted his weight, the sharp brightness of the overhead lights. Kevin swallowed hard. "Kari, look at me, please." She lifted her eyes, and in them lived a storm of confusion, heartbreak, and fear. Fear not of him, but of herself. Of what her emotions had pushed her to do. Of how far she had slipped from the composed woman who commanded entire courtrooms with a glance. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that a single discovery shook your entire foundation, if you've ever doubted your own judgment because love made the truth feel distorted, then you already understand the fragile place she was standing in. And yet this moment, this shocking, painful scene, was only the surface of a story far more tangled than anyone realized. Kari's gaze flickered from Kevin's injured arm to the knife on the floor. The tiny blade seemed harmless, almost ordinary, yet the consequences of what she'd done pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. Kevin exhaled shakily. "This isn't you. Something pushed you here. Something I should have explained sooner." His voice broke, and Kari squeezed her eyes shut. The same woman who once delivered life-altering rulings without hesitation now stood frozen, her mind racing through hours, days, weeks that suddenly looked different in hindsight. The late nights, the unanswered questions, the red underwear she found in his car, the jewelry box she discovered at home, the scent of strong cleaner clinging to the carpet. Each detail had felt like a message. Each message had felt like betrayal. And when the person you trust most seems to be hiding everything that matters, the heart reacts before the mind catches up. Have you ever found something that made your imagination sprint ahead of the facts? Have you ever felt your chest tighten because a tiny clue suggested your entire relationship was built on sand? It's frightening how quickly doubt can rewrite reality. In Kari's world, truth was supposed to be clear, evidence, logic, facts. But in her home, emotion overpowered everything she'd ever learned. She whispered, barely audible, "Kevin, what were you keeping from me?" He looked at her with a mixture of pain and regret, knowing his answer would reshape everything. Kari pressed her palm to her forehead, trying to steady herself as a wave of nausea rolled through her. Her entire career depended on clarity, precision, the ability to see through lies with a calm, disciplined mind. Yet here, in her own kitchen, she felt lost. Kevin took a hesitant step toward her. He didn't reach out. He knew she might pull away, but his voice softened the way it always did when he was trying to fix something he didn't fully understand. "I should have told you sooner," he said quietly. "I thought I could handle everything on my own. I didn't want to worry you." Carrie's throat tightened. You left me guessing. You left me filling in the blanks with the worst possibilities. And that was the truth she'd been avoiding. It wasn't anger that brought her to this point. It wasn't vengeance. It was fear, raw, consuming fear, mixed with exhaustion she never admitted, and loneliness she never voiced. Anyone who's ever cared deeply knows this fear. The fear of losing someone without warning, the fear of being replaced, the fear of discovering you were the only one fighting to keep a relationship alive. When doubt creeps in, even the smallest sign can feel like confirmation of your worst thoughts. Carrie looked at the faint streaks of blood drying on Kevin's arm and whispered with a trembling voice, "Tell me the truth, all of it. No more hiding." Kevin inhaled slowly, preparing to reveal everything he had kept tucked away, things that would change the meaning of every moment leading up to this night. Kevin leaned against the counter, breathing carefully, as if the truth itself required preparation. Carrie waited, arms wrapped around herself, trying to protect whatever was left of her certainty. "You think I betrayed you," he murmured, "but the real story doesn't fit the picture you saw." Her eyes narrowed, desperate for something solid, something she could finally trust. This is the moment where everything inside a person shifts, when the fear of knowing battles the fear of staying in the dark, and you, listening right now. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been so sure you were right, only to learn you misread everything? Have you ever followed your emotions down a path that made perfect sense in the moment, only to discover later that the truth was standing miles away from the conclusion you reached? That's the danger of doubt. It makes strangers out of the people we love. It makes ordinary details feel like warnings. It convinces us that the ache in our chest must mean something terrible is hiding in plain sight. Carrie exhaled, shaky and exhausted. What did I find, Kevin? What was I really looking at? He lifted his bandaged arm, eyes softening with regret. Something I never should have kept secret. But it wasn't betrayal. And you'll understand why. This is where their story truly begins. Long before the knife, the fear, the panic. Before the misunderstanding that nearly destroyed everything. And if you're still with me, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and comment about a time you misunderstood someone or felt misunderstood yourself. It helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The morning sun pushed through the courthouse windows in long golden beams, warming the polished benches and casting a gentle glow over the room. Judge Carrie Bergnom III sat elevated above the rest, robe crisp, posture flawless, fingers resting lightly along the edge of her bench. Her voice carried through the courtroom with a steady calm that made even the most hardened defendant sit up straighter. She was known for this, her quiet strength, the type of authority that didn't need loud commands or towering gestures. Instead, she delivered rulings with a kind of measured certainty that left no room for confusion. People trusted her. They trusted her decisions, her fairness, her ability to find balance between compassion and accountability. Today, as she read the final lines of a sentencing decision, many in the room watched her with quiet admiration. Her tone was soft, but it carried the weight of 100 years of judicial tradition. She didn't speak in theatrics. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't try to intimidate anyone. Carrie spoke in truth, in clarity, in verdicts. She closed the folder in front of her and adjusted her glasses, offering a nod to the clerk. "Court is adjourned," she said, giving the gavel a gentle tap. The sound echoed through the courtroom, but to Carrie it felt distant, a reminder of the life she lived, structured, ruled by schedules, shaped by expectations she had carried since childhood. The Bergnom name was respected in the legal world. Her father had held a prominent position in a state office. Her grandmother had been one of the first female judges in her district. Her lineage was a series of disciplined minds and unwavering moral compasses, and Carrie was their pride, a symbol of the family legacy continuing. Yet, no one in the courtroom saw what she carried behind her perfectly composed expression. No one knew how exhausting it felt to always be the steady one, the wise one, the controlled one. She had spent years training herself to keep personal emotions at bay, to avoid letting her heart influence her decisions. It was an admirable skill in her career, but in her marriage, it had slowly become a quiet barrier. As she stepped into her chambers, the noise of the courtroom died behind her, replaced by the soft shuffle of papers and the hum of the small desk fan she kept on low. She hung her robe carefully, smoothing out the fabric as she did every day. Those small routines. They grounded her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kevin. "Hope you're having a steady day. Grab lunch if you can. Kay." She smiled softly. Despite everything, he always tried. Even when she worked late, even when she forgot to text back, even when she was too drained to talk, he still sent little messages like these. Kevin Wiegand, the muralist who painted life-size faces along city walls, who believed color could change emotions the same way justice shaped futures. They were opposites in many ways. He was warmth, spontaneous energy, impulsive creativity. She was structure, calm logic, steady routines. And yet for 7 years those differences had made them stronger, not weaker. Or at least, that's how it had once felt. Lately things shifted, not dramatically, just subtly enough to notice. Carrie glanced at her desk, piled with case files, motions, and reports. Her caseload had doubled over the past few months. The weight of it pressed into her shoulders every day. She worked late, she woke early. She barely had time to breathe, let alone nurture the marriage she held so dearly. Kevin had his own demands. His biggest art showcase in years was approaching, and he often left the house before she woke up and returned after she had already slipped into restless sleep. They lived together but passed each other like commuters chasing different trains. Still, they tried. Every morning before she headed to the courthouse, she leaned over Kevin's sleeping form and kissed him on the cheek. She whispered the same thing she always whispered, "Stay bright." And he would smile, sometimes in his sleep, and murmur, always, that simple exchange had once been a promise, a vow, a reminder that no matter how busy life became, their hearts were still intertwined. But recently, that promise had begun to feel more fragile than either of them realized. Carrie grabbed her briefcase and stepped out into the hallway. Colleagues greeted her with polite nods, and she offered warm smiles in return. She walked through the courthouse with the same graceful stride she was known for, confident, self-assured. But inside, her thoughts drifted back to Kevin. She missed him. Not just his presence, but the easiness they once shared, the way he used to pull her into a hug from behind while she cooked, the way he laughed at his own jokes until he couldn't breathe, the way he painted little hearts in the margins of her grocery lists, the way he used to open up to her about every fear, every idea, every dream. Now, he felt far away. They weren't fighting. There were no harsh words or slammed doors. It was the kind of distance that didn't make noise, the kind that accumulated quietly. As she reached the courthouse parking garage, she paused for a moment, shutting her eyes and drawing a long breath. She had been feeling stretched thin for weeks, professionally and personally. It was as if her life was full of moving parts she couldn't keep aligned anymore. But Kari was not someone who broke easily. She believed in endurance, in pushing forward, in working through the tension rather than turning away from it. She believed in her marriage. She believed in Kevin. And she believed, wholeheartedly, that once their schedules calmed, they would find their way back to the sweetness they had always shared. She had no idea her quiet hope was standing on the edge of a cliff. Carrie opened her car door, set her briefcase down, and sat behind the wheel. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Kevin. "Thinking about you. Can't wait to show you what I've been working on. Tonight?" Kay, her lips curved into a subtle smile. Maybe things were shifting back. Maybe they were finding each other again. She texted back, "Tonight. Can't wait." She started the engine and rested her hands on the steering wheel for a moment. A soft knot tightened in her chest, something she couldn't name yet, something she assumed was just stress. Curry took another breath and whispered to herself, "Stay steady, keep going." She pulled out of the parking garage and merged into the flow of the city. Horns honked, people hurried across crosswalks, and sunlight glinted off skyscraper windows. Life moved with restless energy around her. Inside her car, however, she sat quietly, reflecting on the life she was trying so hard to balance. She replayed Kevin's laugh in her mind. She pictured him with paint-smeared hands and clothes dotted with blue, green, and gold. She imagined the soft way he always brushed hair behind her ear when she didn't notice him walk into the room. Despite their recent distance, her heart still reached for him, and that love, steady as it seemed, would soon collide with a set of misunderstandings so powerful they would shake the foundations of her life. For now, though, Carrie only knew the truth as she understood it. She was a judge people respected, a woman people relied on, a wife who believed in the man she married, and someone who had no idea that the next chapter of her life would test every one of those identities, one by one. The Thursday afternoon air clung heavily to the walls of the courthouse parking garage, trapping the heat like a closed jar. Judge Carrie Bergnam III stepped out of the elevator with her briefcase in hand, shoulders tight from hours of hearings and long testimonies that seemed to stretch endlessly. Her heels clicked sharply against the concrete, a familiar sound she usually found grounding, but not today. Today, something felt off. She didn't know why at first. She couldn't name it. It drifted beneath her awareness like a quiet warning, nudging her senses without giving her anything to grasp, until she saw it. Kevin's car. Parked 2 spaces away from her own, her steps slowed. She blinked once, thinking she might be mistaken. Kevin was supposed to be at his studio across town. Thursdays were usually his busiest days, full of planning meetings, paint deliveries, and last-minute adjustments for the upcoming art showcase. He never came to the courthouse, never parked here, never had a reason to. Carrie's pulse quickened. "Why are you here?" she whispered under her breath, her words swallowed by the stillness of the garage. She approached cautiously, her eyes narrowing as she realized the driver's side door wasn't fully shut. It hung barely ajar, just enough for a wedge of shadow to peek through. Her mind tried to stay rational. Kevin was forgetful sometimes, but leaving a car door open in a public garage was unlike him. Corey placed her hand gently on the corner of the door and pushed it wider. "Kevin?" she called. Her voice echoed, soft and slightly strained. The concrete swallowed the sound as if it didn't want to return it. There was no reply, no footstep, no familiar hum of her husband's voice drifting toward her. Instead, she noticed a plastic bag on the passenger seat, the kind Kevin used to carry his brushes, paints, and rags. Completely normal. She exhaled, mentally chastising herself for overthinking. But when she reached in to adjust the bag, something bright caught her eye. Something small, something soft, something red, a pair of women's underwear, red lace, folded neatly, sitting there like it belonged. Her heart lurched. She jerked her hand back as if she'd touched something searing. For a moment she simply stared, wide-eyed, unable to make sense of what she was looking at. Her thoughts scrambled, tripping over each other, forming flashes rather than full ideas. "Why is that here? It's not mine. Who put that there? Why would he? No, this doesn't make sense. We're fine, right?" She gripped the edge of the door for balance. The air suddenly felt thick. Her breaths came unevenly. Her chest tightened. Carrie Bergnam, who faced violent offenders, manipulative witnesses, and emotional families on a daily basis, felt the kind of fear she rarely admitted existed in her. The type that didn't come from danger, but from heartbreak. A sharp sting pressed behind her eyes, warning her that tears were rising, tears she refused to allow in public. Her mind tried to come up with explanations, reaching for logic the way she did in court. Could it be trash? Laundry? Something left by accident? But who folds something like that by accident? No. This wasn't random. This felt intentional, planned, placed. Or at least, that's how it looked in her already exhausted mind. "Carrie?" The sound of Kevin's voice snapped her back to reality. His footsteps approached rapidly, echoing around pillars and concrete. She spun around just as he came into view. Paint-splattered jeans, white shirt dotted with turquoise streaks, and a look of surprise on his face. "Oh, hey," he said, slightly breathless. "You're early." He smiled. Nervously, she noticed. Kevin smiled nervously when he broke something, or when he was about to admit something stupid, or when he wasn't prepared for a conversation. Her eyes flicked from his face to the car, then back again. "Carrie," he repeated, slower now. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer. She stepped aside, letting him see inside the car without saying a word. When his gaze landed on the red underwear, the color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened, then closed again. He reached into the car and froze, as if touching the item would make him look guilty. I know how this looks," he stammered. Her voice trembled. "Then explain it." He swallowed. "It's not, Carrie, listen, I swear it's not." She crossed her arms, her grip tightening around her elbows. She had seen this posture hundreds of times in court, someone about to dig themselves deeper with every word. Kevin rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting everywhere except hers. It was a joke. From my crew. They were messing with me because I said I didn't know how to plan surprises without getting stressed. He sounded like he was reading lines from a script he hadn't rehearsed. He sounded unsure. He sounded nervous. Her throat tightened. A joke, she repeated coldly. Yes, but look, it's not what you think. One of the guys thought it'd be funny, and I threw it in the car, and I forgot it was there. She raised her eyebrows. You forgot something like that? I didn't think you'd see it. The words hit her like a slap. He realized it the moment they escaped his mouth. His expression collapsed. I didn't think anyone would see it, he corrected quickly. But the damage had already been done. Carrie closed her eyes for a brief second, steadying herself. She wasn't gullible. She wasn't naive. She had listened to liars for years. People who twisted their stories, stumbled through excuses, tried to dodge questions. Kevin's breathing changed. She heard it. She saw the way his jaw tensed. She noticed how he kept shifting his weight. Her instincts kicked in, not as his wife, but as the judge who could detect deception even when wrapped in charm. And right now, her instincts told her, he is not telling the full truth. Her heart didn't break loudly. Carrie, Kevin pleaded, I swear it's nothing. She opened her eyes, but her gaze remained hard. Then why can't you explain it clearly? He shook his head, frustrated. Because I wasn't expecting to have this conversation right now. I wasn't prepared. So there is something to prepare for. No, that's not. He let out a harsh exhale. Just, please listen. I am listening, she whispered. I've been listening. But everything coming out of your mouth sounds shaky. Kevin froze. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Carrie finally stepped back, releasing her grip on the car door. She tried to walk toward her own car, but her knees felt unsteady. Let's go home, she said softly. Not angrily, not sharply, just defeated. He reached for her arm. Carrie, please, Kevin, just not here. He looked pained, like he wanted to argue, but he lowered his hand and nodded. The drive home was quiet. Neither of them spoke. Carrie stared out the window, watching the city blur past, each streetlight casting a flicker across her face. Kevin drove with both hands gripping the wheel too tightly. Inside, Carrie's thoughts spun in different directions. Had she missed signs? Was he hiding more? Was the distance between them not stress, but someone else? Every memory from the past few months replayed differently now. Every late night, every vague answer, every rushed goodbye. Her trust, once firm and steady, felt as if it were slipping through her fingers like sand. Kevin kept glancing at her, but she didn't look back. She couldn't. Her heart was full of questions she wasn't ready to voice. When they finally pulled into their driveway, Carrie stepped out of the car before Kevin could say anything. She walked into the house and headed straight for the kitchen, placing her briefcase on the counter and gripping the edge of the sink. Her breathing was shallow. Her mind raced. Her chest ached. When Kevin entered the house, he approached her slowly, as if she were made of fragile glass. Carrie, please, let me talk. She didn't move. I need the truth. Not comfort, not excuses, just the truth. His answer was barely a whisper. I'm trying. Her eyes met his, and in that moment she felt something shift in her world, a delicate, painful shift that told her the life she knew was about to change in ways she wasn't prepared for. And all of it started with a discovery she never wanted to make. The house was unusually quiet when Carrie stepped inside. Not peaceful, quiet in the way a room feels after an argument, even when nothing has been said yet. She set her briefcase on the counter, but her hand lingered on it for a moment, as if letting go would make everything around her collapse. Kevin followed a few steps behind. His keys jingled in his hand before he placed them on the table a little too abruptly. The sound echoed through the living room, widening the distance between them. Carrie didn't turn around. She kept her eyes fixed on the sink, watching a single droplet from the faucet tremble at the edge before falling into the basin. Please talk to me, Kevin said softly. I'm tired, she replied, though what she meant was, I'm hurting. He took a cautious step forward. Carrie, I swear, I don't want another shaky explanation. She cut in, her voice thin but sharp around the edges. I want clarity, and right now, you're not giving me any. He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand to stop him. "I need a minute," she whispered. Kevin swallowed hard and nodded. He walked to the other side of the kitchen, giving her space. His shoulders slumped, and the frustration on his face was mixed with fear, the kind of fear someone feels when they're watching something important slip through their fingers. Kari placed both hands on the counter and lowered her head. Her heartbeat was heavy in her chest, a slow, painful thud that she couldn't ignore. In court, she had all the tools she needed: evidence, statements, timelines, logic. At home, she had none of those things. All she had was emotion, and it was pulling her in too many directions. She pushed away from the counter and walked into the living room. Kevin watched her, unsure if he should follow. She sat on the couch, her posture stiff, as if her entire body were bracing for impact. Kevin approached carefully, sitting across from her instead of beside her. He didn't reach for her hands. He didn't lean forward. He kept his distance, knowing a single wrong move could make things worse. "Kari," he began, "I know things look bad, and I know you're upset, but I need you to remember something." She lifted her gaze. "I remember everything, Kevin, every detail, every moment we've shared, and today doesn't fit any of those memories." He winced. She continued, "That thing in your car, that wasn't nothing. That was someone's underwear, folded, placed where I could see it." Her voice cracked. "You say it was a joke, but you don't sound even remotely confident about that." "I am telling the truth," Kevin insisted. "Are you?" she challenged. "Because you talk like you're terrified of giving me the wrong answer." His jaw tightened. "I'm terrified of losing you." The words hit her unexpectedly. Her breath caught. Emotion flashed across her face, but she forced herself to stay composed. Kevin leaned forward slightly. "Kari, I mishandled things. I should have been clearer. But I need you to believe that I would never, ever hurt you like that." She looked at him for a long moment. His eyes were wide, pleading, full of desperation. But desperation could come from guilt just as easily as from love. She lowered her gaze. "Right now, I don't know what to believe." Silence settled between them, thick and smothering. Kevin rubbed his hands together, as though trying to warm himself. Kari's fingers dug into the couch cushion, her nails pressing crescents into the fabric. Finally, Kevin whispered, "How long have you been feeling distant from me?" The question startled her. She didn't answer immediately. She thought about the mornings where they barely spoke, the nights where she fell asleep before he came home, the quick kisses that felt more habitual than heartfelt, the absence of small moments that used to fill their days. "A while," she admitted quietly, "but I thought it was temporary. I thought once we both got through our workloads, we'd find each other again." Kevin nodded slowly. "Me too. But you didn't tell me anything," she continued. "You kept secrets, whatever they are. You acted strange, you avoided questions. And now this?" She let out a shaky breath. "It's too much all at once." His face softened in guilt. "I didn't avoid you on purpose, I just didn't want to say the wrong thing. That in itself tells me there's something you don't want me to know. Kari, don't," she whispered, holding up a hand. "Just don't." Kevin lowered his head. A long, heavy silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint sound of traffic outside their window. At last, Kevin stood up and walked toward her. He moved slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. But she didn't move. She didn't know what she wanted. He knelt in front of her, resting his palms lightly on his knees. "I love you," he said simply. "More than anything, more than anyone. You're the reason I push myself, the reason I wake up feeling hopeful." His voice trembled. "Please don't let today destroy what we have." Her eyes shimmered. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. "Kevin," she whispered, "love isn't the issue. Trust is—" He nodded, pain twisting through his expression. "I know. And right now," she continued, "everything I've seen gives me a reason to question that trust." Kevin inhaled deeply. "Then let me earn it back. Tell me what I have to do." She shook her head. "I don't even know where to start." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if bracing himself before speaking again. "Then start here. Talk to me. Yell at me if you need to. Ask me anything. Just don't shut me out." Kari took a long breath. Her chest rose and fell slowly, weighed down by the ache of betrayal, even if the betrayal wasn't proven. When she finally spoke, her voice barely carried across the room. I just want the truth. Kevin nodded once. Then I'll give it. He stood and reached for her hand. She hesitated, but let him take it. His fingers were warm, trembling slightly. Come here, he said quietly. He guided her to the kitchen table, the same table where they once celebrated anniversaries, shared meals, made plans for the future. Now, it felt like neutral territory, a place where they could confront the growing cracks between them. They sat across from each other. Carrie waited. Kevin took a breath to speak, then hesitated. Her heart dropped. See, she whispered. You're still holding back. No, he said quickly. I need to choose my words carefully. That isn't reassuring. I know, he admitted, voice strained. But I promise I'm not hiding something terrible. I'm not being unfaithful. I'm not throwing us away. His eyes shined. I just made a bunch of mistakes trying to do something right. Carrie shook her head slowly, unsure whether the frustration she felt was from him or from her own aching confusion. She stood up abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. Kevin rose too, instinctively reaching for her arm, but she stepped back, refusing the contact. The rejection struck him hard. He looked wounded, not physically, but in a deeper way she wasn't used to seeing from him. Carrie, he whispered, voice breaking. Please don't walk away from me. I'm not walking away, she said softly. I need air. She moved toward the hallway, passing the framed photographs of their vacations, their celebrations, their happiest days, all reminders of a life that now felt like it was slipping through a crack she couldn't seal. Carrie, wait. She paused in the doorway. He stood in the middle of the living room, hands slightly lifted as if trying to hold onto something that was already falling. Please, he murmured, don't shut me out. You're angry, you're hurt, I get that. But I'm here, I'm not running, I want to fix this. She closed her eyes. For a moment she nearly turned back. For a moment she almost collapsed into his arms. For a moment she wanted to believe everything he was saying without question. But the pain was louder. I need time, she whispered instead. Kevin opened his mouth to respond, but she had already turned away. She grabbed her coat, slipped on her shoes, and stepped outside. The cool air hit her instantly, making her feel both calmer and more fragile. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed distance. She needed to think. She needed to breathe without the weight of his explanations, half-formed and shaky, pulling her deeper into confusion. Behind her, through the closed door, she could imagine Kevin standing alone in the living room, staring at the space she left behind. Two people in the same home, separated not by walls but by fear, doubt, and a silence neither of them knew how to break. A marriage, once warm, bright, and full of promise, now flickered like a candle pressed too close to a draft, and neither of them realized just how close they were to losing everything. The next morning began like any other Friday, yet it carried a weight Carrie couldn't shake. She moved through her motions robotically, brushing her hair, securing it in a neat bun, applying a thin line of eyeliner with practiced precision, but every moment felt strained, as if her world had shifted ever so slightly off its axis. She arrived at the courthouse early, hoping to bury herself in work. Usually, immersing herself in legal documents and procedural clarity grounded her. But today, even the familiar rhythm couldn't quiet her thoughts. Her mind flashed back to the red underwear, to Kevin's stammered explanation, to the look in his eyes, part fear, part confusion, part something she couldn't read. The distance between them felt deeper than a single argument. It felt like a wound left unattended for too long. By noon, she couldn't take it anymore. Her concentration wavered. She misread a sentence 3 times. She forgot her coffee on the bench outside her chambers. Her clerk asked if she was all right. She wasn't, and pretending she was only made the ache worse. So for the first time in months, Carrie canceled her afternoon hearings and left early. She needed clarity, not from legal documents, but from home, from the place where things had begun to fall apart. As she drove, rain clouds gathered overhead, casting a gray tint across the city. Carrie tapped her thumb nervously against the steering wheel. She told herself she wanted answers. But the truth felt heavier. She wanted hope. She wanted something that proved she hadn't been foolish for trusting Kevin all these years. She wanted today to make sense. When she reached their building, her heartbeat quickened. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The moment she opened the apartment door, a sharp tang hit her nose. Lemon cleaner. Strong, overpowering, almost suffocating. Carrie froze. This wasn't normal. Kevin used cleaners, sure, but never like this. Never enough of the scent to cling to the air so thickly it felt invasive. "Kevin?" she called. Her voice sounded smaller than she intended. There was movement in the living room, quick, frantic. She stepped forward and saw Kevin on his knees, scrubbing the rug with a level of intensity that didn't match any logical explanation. His hair was messy, sticking to his forehead. His shirt was damp with sweat. A soaked towel lay beside him, stained with something darkened by liquid. Her stomach clenched. "What happened?" Carrie asked, her tone sharper than she meant it to be. Kevin jumped slightly, startled. He turned to face her, eyes wide. "Oh, hey, I didn't expect you back yet." "That's obvious," she said, walking deeper into the room. "What are you doing?" He hesitated. "I spilled some paint." Kari looked at the carpet. There was no paint tray nearby. No tubes, no brushes, no splatter on the walls. Nothing to suggest he had been working on anything creative. Just a single patch of damp carpet and a bottle of lemon cleaner beside him. "Where?" she asked coolly. He blinked. "What? Where did the paint spill?" she repeated. He gestured vaguely at the rug. "Right here." She examined the area closely. The discoloration didn't look like paint. It looked like the aftermath of a scrub-soaked panic. She straightened slowly, her gaze narrowing. "Kevin, what aren't you telling me?" He froze again, just like he had in the parking garage. The same hesitation, the same nervous posture, the same inability to give a direct answer. "I said I spilled paint," he replied too quickly. "You said that," Carrie countered softly. "But it's not true." He swallowed hard. It's not." His breathing shifted, growing uneven. She watched him struggle, internally, visibly. And with every second of silence stretching between them, her suspicion deepened. "Kevin," she whispered, "I'm giving you a chance to be honest with me. Please don't lie." His shoulders sagged, his expression folding into something like defeat. "I'm not lying. I just don't want you to worry." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "When you hide things from me, I worry more." Kevin closed his eyes. Carrie knelt beside him, reaching for the damp spot on the rug. Her fingers grazed the fibers. They felt coarse, damaged from aggressive scrubbing. "What's spilled here?" she pressed. He looked away. That was answer enough. Carrie's eyes drifted downward, toward Kevin's pocket. The fabric bulged slightly, as if something small and hard were tucked inside. Before she could question it, he shifted, and the object fell out. A small velvet jewelry box rolled across the floor and landed at her foot. Time seemed to pause. Carrie stared at the box, the soft texture, the shape, the weight of implication it carried. She didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. Her voice was quiet, trembling. "What is that?" Kevin's eyes widened in panic. "It's not what you think." Carrie kept her gaze fixed on the box. "Then what is it?" He hesitated again. Her breath hitched. "Who's it for?" His silence was louder than shouting. Carrie bent down and picked up the box. She opened it slowly, bracing herself. Inside lay a delicate necklace, silver, with a small teardrop pendant adorned with soft blue enamel. It was beautiful, beautiful, and not her style, not even close. She wouldn't wear this. Kevin knew that. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Who is she?" "No," he said quickly, reaching out. "It's not like that." "Then tell me who she is." "I can't tell you that yet." Carrie felt something collapse inside her, quietly, painfully. "You can't tell me?" she repeated, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "Why not? Please, Carrie, this will make sense soon, I promise." "I don't need a promise," she said, voice shaking. "I need an answer." Kevin stepped closer, reaching for her arm. "Please, just trust me." He flinched. Carrie closed the box and placed it on the table beside her. Her voice held no anger, only heartbreak. "You are keeping secrets, you're hiding things, you're cleaning up messes you can't explain. And now this. I don't know what to think." Kevin's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I never wanted you to find out like this." He pressed a hand to his forehead. "I'm trying to do something good. I'm trying to help someone. But if I tell you everything now, It'll ruin the whole thing. And I didn't want to ruin it. No, he insisted, eyes pleading. Please don't say that. Carrie turned away, her vision blurring. She needed air, she needed distance, she needed anything other than this crushing confusion. She grabbed her purse and shoes, her movements stiff and unsteady. Carrie, wait, please. Kevin reached out, desperation in his voice. Don't go. Talk to me. If I stay, I'm going to fall apart, she whispered. Kevin stopped moving. Carrie stepped toward the door, then paused, turning her head slightly. Her voice was barely audible. I don't want to fall apart in front of someone I'm not sure I can believe. And with that, she left. The door clicked behind her. Outside, the hallway felt colder. The air felt tight. Her chest ached in ways she hadn't known were possible. She leaned against the wall, covering her face with her hands. She loved him. She loved him so deeply it hurt. But love didn't erase doubt, and right now she was drowning in both. As she walked toward the elevator, she looked back once, just once, at the closed door of the home she shared with Kevin. Inside, he stood motionless in the living room, hands on his knees as he tried to control the rising panic in his chest. He had no idea that everything he thought he was protecting, he was actually destroying, and Carrie had no idea that the truth, real truth, was far different from the conclusion fear was building inside her. But both of them would learn that soon enough. Just not today. Today was the day everything cracked. The next 2 days passed in a blur, an exhausted, hollow blur that left Carrie moving through life like she was underwater. She worked. She smiled politely. She nodded through conversations. But inside, she was unraveling at a pace she could barely control. Her heart felt tender, bruised by doubt. Her mind felt overworked, pushing her thoughts in endless circles. Her sleep was broken, full of shallow breaths and repeated images of the jewelry box, the carpet, the underwear lying in Kevin's car. Every memory she replayed only made the pieces feel more mismatched. By Saturday evening, she found herself sitting alone in a small cafe, stirring a cup of tea she hadn't touched. People came and went around her, laughing, chatting, living, but she couldn't bring herself to join the world. Her chest felt tight. She needed comfort. She needed answers. She needed him. Despite everything, she missed Kevin, missed his warmth, missed his voice, missed the easy way he always managed to make her feel grounded. That conflicted longing was the final push she needed. She grabbed her purse, stood up, and walked out into the chilly night air. By the time she reached their apartment, the sky had deepened into shades of navy and charcoal. Lights glowed in the windows of the building, and the smell of someone grilling on a balcony below drifted upward. Carrie hesitated at the door. Part of her wanted to turn back. Part of her wanted to run inside and collapse into Kevin's arms. She didn't know which part would win. She took a breath, slid the key into the lock, and stepped inside. The lights were warm, soft, inviting. Kevin stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, the kind she loved on cold nights. The scent filled the apartment, wrapping around her like a memory of better days. He turned when he heard the door close. Relief washed over his face. "Carrie," he said gently, "you're home." The sound of his voice, familiar, steady, earnest, hit her harder than she expected. She stepped forward slowly. Her coat hung loosely over her shoulders. Her expression was tired, vulnerable. "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted. Kevin set the spoon down and wiped his hands on a towel. "You always have a place here. Always." Her throat tightened. He approached cautiously, as if walking toward a wounded animal, careful not to startle her. When he reached her, he stopped just a step away. "You look exhausted," he whispered. "I haven't slept," she replied. "Neither have I." They stared at each other, two people lost in misunderstandings neither of them intended to create. For a moment, the tension softened. For a moment, there was only longing, raw and human. Kevin lifted a hand, hesitated, then gently brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers grazed her skin lightly. She shivered, not from cold, but from how much she missed his touch. "Baby, I'm sorry," he murmured, "for everything I've handled poorly. I never wanted to hurt you." Tears filled her eyes, bright and trembling. "Then why did it feel like you did?" He didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how to say it without making everything worse. Instead, he leaned in slowly. Carrie's breath faltered. Her hands hovered at her sides. She should have pulled back. She should have demanded answers first. But she was so tired of feeling alone. When his lips brushed hers, the ache in her chest loosened. It was a soft kiss, gentle, hesitant, filled with longing and regret. She kissed him back, tears sliding down her cheeks. For a few seconds, they weren't two people drowning in doubt. They were simply Kari and Kevin, two souls holding on to the last thread connecting them. Their foreheads touched, breaths mingling. "Please," Kevin whispered. "Trust me a little longer." She closed her eyes, torn between emotion and logic. "I'm trying." He pulled her into a careful hug, arms wrapping around her waist with the tenderness she had always loved. She let herself collapse into it, resting her cheek against his shoulder. For a moment, it felt like enough, but fragility has a way of breaking when pressed too hard. Later that night, after they ate dinner in near silence and sat on opposite ends of the couch watching a movie neither of them followed, something shifted inside Carrie again. The closeness soothed her, but it didn't erase the unresolved questions. When Kevin excused himself to take a phone call, stepping into the bedroom and lowering his voice, Carrie's pulse quickened. She listened, not intentionally at first, but when she couldn't make out the words, her imagination filled the silence with possibilities she didn't want to consider. Minutes later, Kevin returned, forcing a smile. "Sorry, just work stuff." Her expression tightened. "At 10 at night? It happens, does it?" she asked quietly. He froze. That one moment, that tiny hesitation, was the tipping point. All the doubts she'd been holding back surged forward. Something inside her snapped, not with violence, but with overwhelming fear. "Carrie," Kevin said softly, noticing her shift. "Talk to me. I can't keep pretending everything is normal," she whispered. He stepped closer. "Then let's talk." "No," she said, backing away. "Because when we talk, you give me half answers. You look away. You keep telling me to wait." He sighed heavily. "I'm handling something important, something delicate." "Then tell me what it is." "I can't yet." Her voice rose, thin and shaky. "Why not? Who are you protecting? Who are you lying to me for?" "I'm not lying. You are hiding something, and I'm losing my mind trying to guess what it is." Her breathing turned uneven. Her hands shook. Her chest tightened painfully, as if her ribs were squeezing her heart. Kevin reached for her. "Baby, please." She stumbled backward, knocking a stack of mail off the counter. Envelopes scattered across the floor. "I can't do this," she cried. "I can't keep wondering who you're texting, who you're buying jewelry for, why your car had—" "Stop," he said firmly. "Why should I stop?" She shot back. "I'm the one drowning in doubt." Kevin's jaw clenched. He reached out instinctively, trying to steady her. "Carrie, please, I love you. Nothing is happening." "Then prove it," she screamed. The silence that followed was so sudden it felt unnatural. Carrie's chest heaved. Kevin stood frozen, his hand still halfway raised toward her. Her eyes darted around the kitchen, unfocused. She felt cornered by her own emotions, trapped between love and fear with no escape route. Her heart raced, her vision blurred. This wasn't the controlled, composed judge the world saw. This wasn't the calm woman who solved problems with logic. This was a wife terrified of losing the man she adored. She reached out blindly, grasping for something to steady her, and her hand wrapped around the small decorative knife they kept on the counter for opening packages. Kevin's face changed instantly, not with fear of her, but fear for her. "Carrie," he murmured, stepping forward slowly. "Put it down." "I just want the truth," she whispered, tears streaming. "Please, Kevin, just tell me the truth." He took one more step. "I'm right here. You're scared. We can talk, then talk." He moved closer, hands raised, but Carrie's mind was too clouded. Her heart was too overwhelmed. When he closed the distance, reaching to hold her, she flinched violently. Her hand jerked. 12 fast, panicked motions, not deep, not deliberate, not calculated, just the frantic reaction of someone emotionally overloaded, cornered by fear and blinded by heartbreak. Kevin gasped at the sting, more startled than injured. The tiny blade left thin lines along his forearm and shoulder, shallow marks that bled lightly but looked dramatic against his skin. "Carrie, stop," he managed. The moment she saw the first trickle of red, everything inside her collapsed. The knife fell from her hand. She staggered backward. Her voice cracked into a sob. "Oh my God, Kevin, I didn't mean, Kevin, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." He pressed his hand against one of the small cuts, wincing. But when he looked at her, his eyes weren't angry. They were devastated, not because of the pain. "Carrie," he whispered, "you're hurting, and I didn't help you. I should have told you the truth before any of this." She collapsed to her knees, hands covering her face. I would never." "I know," he said softly. She shook uncontrollably. Kevin knelt beside her despite the discomfort, placing his uninjured hand gently on her shoulder. "Carrie," he murmured, "look at me." She lifted her face, eyes swollen, expression shattered. He gave her the look she had needed for weeks, the one that said he wasn't her enemy, that he still loved her, that he wasn't going anywhere. Her voice broke. "Why didn't you?" His answer was quiet, heartbreaking, honest. "Because I thought protecting everyone would make things easier. I didn't realize I was hurting the person I loved most." In the distance, the faint wail of approaching sirens filled the night, called by a neighbor who heard shouting. But none of that mattered, yet. All that mattered was the truth Kevin was finally ready to reveal. And it was nothing like what Carrie thought she was fighting. The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the windows of the apartment complex, painting the hallway in shifting colors. Carrie sat on the floor of their living room with her back against the sofa, knees drawn to her chest, trembling so badly her teeth gently tapped together. Kevin sat nearby on a dining chair, an EMT wrapping thin bandages around the small cuts on his arm. The room felt far too bright, far too exposed. 2 officers stood at the doorway asking questions, but Kevin held up a hand to pause them. "She didn't attack me," he repeated for the 3rd time, his voice steady despite the sting in his arm. "She panicked. It was an accident." One of the officers glanced toward Carrie, her face pale, eyes red, breathing shallow, and then looked back at Kevin. "Sir, we still need to take a statement." "And you will," he said calmly, "but I want to speak to her first." Carrie's eyes darted up at him. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. He wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't demanding consequences. He was defending her. The EMT finished securing the last bandage before stepping aside. Kevin thanked them quietly, then slowly approached Carrie. He crouched down so they were eye level, moving carefully to avoid startling her. "Carrie," he murmured, "look at me." Her eyes flooded again. I didn't mean to hurt you, I know. You could have been seriously hurt," she whispered. He shook his head gently. "What happened tonight wasn't about the knife. It was about everything you've been carrying." Her face crumpled, tears running freely now. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." Kevin sat beside her, resting his injured arm on his lap. "I know," he said again. "And that's why you need to hear the truth, all of it. No more half explanations." She nodded shakily, hugging her knees tighter. He took a breath, preparing himself, then began. "Carrie," he said carefully, "the underwear in my car really wasn't from another woman. It wasn't anything romantic. It wasn't what you thought." Her lips pressed together, bracing for impact. "My crew was messing with me, a dumb prank. I told them I was trying to plan something special and said I get nervous about surprises. They started joking around. One of them tossed it into my bag, and I shoved it in the car because I didn't want anyone to see it lying around the studio." She frowned. "But why was it folded?" He winced. "Because the idiots folded it before they threw it into my bag. They thought it was funnier that way." Carrie closed her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but doubt still clung to the edges of her mind. "You could have just told me that," she whispered. "I should have," he admitted. "But when I saw your face in the garage, I froze. Everything came out wrong." "What about the carpet?" she asked softly. "You were scrubbing it like something terrible had happened." Kevin exhaled slowly. His shoulders sagged, not in guilt but in exhaustion. "I spilled paint. I swear I did. I had the container open because I was checking a shade. My hoodie pulled on it when I leaned over, and it tipped over the edge. I panicked because I knew if it dried we'd have to replace the whole rug." Carrie blinked. "But the cleaner was too strong. It smelled like you were trying to hide something. The paint was oil-based," he explained. "I used whatever we had under the sink to break it down. I should have told you, I know that. But you walked in before I could explain, and the timing made everything look bad." She swallowed. Her heartbeat felt dull now, heavy with regret. And the late calls? Her voice wavered. The messages? You stepped away from me to answer them. He rubbed his forehead. Those weren't secret conversations. They were planning calls. For the surprise. What surprise? She whispered. He reached into his pocket with his uninjured hand and pulled out his phone. With trembling fingers, he scrolled through messages, turning the screen toward her. Names she recognized from his art crew. His sister, Carrie Ann, the coordinator for his upcoming showcase. Every message was about scheduling, ordering materials, arranging a presentation, creating something significant. She blinked rapidly as her vision blurred. "Why didn't you tell me?" she murmured. "I would have helped. I would have supported you. I didn't want to stress you," he said softly. "I saw how overwhelmed you were at work. I didn't want to add another weight to your shoulders." Her eyes flicked up, but hiding it made everything heavier. He lowered his gaze. "Yes, and I didn't see that soon enough. And the jewelry box?" she asked hoarsely. "The necklace? Who was that for?" He leaned back slightly, giving her space to look at him without pressure. "Carrie Ann," he said gently. "My sister." Carrie's breath caught. "She's been struggling," Kevin continued. "Work, anxiety, feeling isolated. I wanted to get her something meaningful for her birthday, something she'd actually wear and feel connected to." Carrie stared at the floor. "Why didn't you say that from the beginning?" "She asked me not to tell anyone," he said quietly. "She's sensitive about being seen as fragile. I was trying to respect that." Carrie's hand shook. "You were protecting her, while I thought you were hiding another woman." Kevin's expression softened with a deep sadness. "I didn't realize how it looked from your side. I wasn't trying to deceive you. I just thought keeping some things quiet would keep things peaceful." She wiped her cheek. "It didn't." "No," he agreed softly. "It didn't." Carrie's breath trembled. "Everything I thought was pointing to betrayal. None of it was real." "It was real to you," Kevin said, "because I didn't give you context. I left gaps, and you filled them with fear." She pressed a hand to her chest. "I felt like I was losing you." He reached forward slowly, waiting to see if she pulled back. She didn't. His hand rested gently on hers. "You weren't losing me," he whispered. "I was just trying too hard to handle everything on my own." Carrie sniffed. "You hurt me, Kevin, not by cheating, but by shutting me out." His eyes clouded with heartbreak. "I know, and that's what I regret most." The officers returned to the doorway. "Sir, we do need a statement from you now." Kevin nodded, but before following them he turned to Carrie. "I'm not pressing charges," he assured her. "I'm not letting this turn into something it wasn't." Her lip trembled. "Kevin, you're injured." "These aren't wounds," he said gently. "They're reminders that we reached a breaking point neither of us knew how to avoid." He squeezed her hand lightly. "I'll be right back." Carrie watched him walk toward the hallway, her heart twisting with guilt, relief, and something she hadn't felt in days, clarity. She inhaled shakily. Her mind replayed every moment from the past week, every assumption, every unanswered question she filled with the worst possible interpretation. The underwear, the carpet, the necklace, the late nights, the phone calls, none of them were what she believed. None of them fit the story her fear had written. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to quiet her sobs before the officers finished their questions. Her heart ached, not because Kevin had betrayed her, but because she had believed he did. When Kevin returned, he sat beside her again, the living room quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. The officers and EMTs left, closing the door gently behind them. Kevin exhaled long and slow. They're filing it as an emotional incident. No arrest, no charges. They said it's clear I wasn't in danger. Carrie felt tears slip down again. "I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "We were both hurting, and I made everything look far worse than it was." She looked up, her voice fragile. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," he said softly. "And I never wanted to doubt you. I know that too." Their eyes met with a tenderness that had been missing for weeks. A fragile tenderness, but real. "Carrie," he whispered, "we need to talk through this, properly, honestly. No more secrets, no more guessing." She nodded. "Yes, we do." He moved closer, taking her hand with his uninjured one. "And no matter how complicated things get," he murmured, "I don't want you to face them alone." Her breath shivered. "Then don't keep me in the dark." He smiled, small and sad. I won't. From now on, I won't. She rested her forehead against his shoulder, closing her eyes as relief mingled with remorse. The truth she had been afraid of, the betrayal she thought she saw, the story she believed she was living, none of it was real. What was real, painfully, beautifully real, was this moment. Two people, broken by misunderstanding, clinging to each other in the aftermath of fear. Their love hadn't been destroyed. It had been tested. Badly, harshly, but not beyond repair. Carrie inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "Kevin," she whispered, "I want us back." He pulled her close, voice thick with emotion. "We can get back. We will." For the first time in days, she believed him, because now she finally understood the truth she never saw coming. The days following the incident moved quietly, like pages turning in a book no one was ready to read. Carrie awoke each morning with a heaviness in her chest, the memory of that night returning before she had time to brace herself. She wasn't arrested, but the courthouse had placed her on temporary leave while officials reviewed what happened. She understood. Judges were held to high standards. The law wasn't only about verdicts, it was about conduct, character, composure. She respected the system. She had built her life around integrity, and now she felt like she had cracked the foundation she had spent years constructing. Kevin, meanwhile, stayed home to recover. His cuts were healing quickly, but the emotional toll lingered beneath his calm demeanor. He didn't blame Kari, but he also didn't ignore the weight of what they had gone through. He knew healing required more than a few quiet apologies and soft reassurances. Healing required honesty, consistency, and patience. On the first morning after the incident, Carrie stood in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee she'd poured, but couldn't bring herself to drink. Her hands were cold. Her heartbeat felt uneven. The apartment, once familiar, now felt full of echoes. Kevin walked in slowly, his arm wrapped in fresh bandages. His steps were gentle, as if he didn't want the floorboards to make a sound that might unsettle her. "You slept on the couch again," he said softly. "I didn't want to crowd you," Carrie replied without looking up. He stepped closer. "You don't crowd me." She lifted her eyes. They were tired, afraid, and full of guilt. "I hurt you," she whispered. "Accidentally," he reminded her. "And because you thought you were losing me, that doesn't excuse it. It explains it," he corrected gently. Carrie swallowed hard, emotions tightening her throat. "Kevin, I don't know how to look at myself the same way right now." He didn't interrupt. "I'm supposed to represent logic," she continued. "Fairness, emotional control. And look what I did." "You're human," he said simply, "but judges can't afford to be just human." He stepped forward, placing a hand on the counter near hers, not touching but close enough she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You've spent years being composed for everyone else," he said, voice steady. "At some point, something was bound to break, and because you didn't have space to fall apart safely, it happened in the worst possible way." Her eyes watered. "I'm ashamed." He shook his head slowly. "You're hurting. Shame doesn't help you heal." She looked away. Kevin inhaled deeply. "We can fix this, but we can't do it alone." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "We need help," he said. "Professional help. Together." Carrie stared at him, surprised. Kevin wasn't against therapy, but he usually believed they could navigate things on their own. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "We've both been walking around with our own fears and exhaustion, and neither of us has been saying it out loud. We need someone to help us untangle this, to help us learn to talk honestly again." Kari exhaled slowly. "You think counseling would make a difference?" "I think communication will," he replied. "Counseling is just the room it happens in." His certainty eased something in her chest. She nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." 3 days later, they found themselves sitting in a softly lit office with muted colors and comfortable chairs. A licensed counselor named Dr. Eliana Warren greeted them with warm eyes and a calm confidence that made Carrie's shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. They sat side by side on a couch, close but not touching. The space between them symbolized everything they were trying to repair. "Why are you here?" Dr. Warren asked gently. Carrie lowered her gaze. Kevin glanced at her, then spoke first. "Because we love each other," he said. "But we stopped being honest with each other." Carrie nodded, voice trembling. "And because I reacted terribly when I thought he was betraying me." Dr. Warren didn't flinch at that. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. "Tell me what made you believe he was," Carrie explained. haltingly at first, then with growing clarity. The underwear, the jewelry box, the carpet, the late nights, the secrecy, the fear that built up piece by piece. I didn't want to believe the worst, she whispered, but everything felt like a warning, and I felt like I was fading from his life. Kevin listened quietly, his hands woven together in his lap. And Kevin, Dr. Warren asked softly, why weren't you more open? He swallowed. I thought I was protecting her. I didn't want to overwhelm her when her workload was already crushing. I didn't want to burden her with my stress, my insecurities, my plans. Carrie frowned. Your insecurities? He nodded slowly. You're this incredibly respected judge. Everyone looks up to you. And sometimes I feel small next to you, like I'm not as important, like my fears aren't worth mentioning. Carrie's eyes widened. Kevin, you never said that. I didn't want you to think less of me. She reached for his hand without thinking. You're the brightest part of my life. The last thing I would do is think less of you. Kevin's shoulders sagged with relief. Dr. Warren nodded approvingly. You're both speaking honestly now. That's good. But then she addressed Carrie directly. What were you afraid of most? Carrie looked down. Her voice came out soft but devastating in its vulnerability, losing him without warning. Kevin's eyes softened, tears gathering faintly. And what was your fear, Dr. Warren asked, looking at Kevin, when you kept things quiet? That I would disappoint her, he answered. 2 fears, 2 different languages, both carving space between them. Dr. Warren leaned back. You weren't hurting each other intentionally, but you were hurting each other silently. Carrie's breath hitched. She squeezed Kevin's hand tighter. For the first time in weeks, they looked at each other without tension, only understanding. Over the next several weeks, counseling sessions became a routine. Not a punishment, not a chore, but a lifeline. They talked about expectations, about pressures Carrie never voiced, about insecurities Kevin never admitted, about how silence is not comfort, silence is distance. At home, they began practicing small changes. Kevin stopped stepping away to answer calls. Carrie stopped carrying courtroom composure into their personal life. They cooked together, something they hadn't done in months. They shared details about their days instead of glossing over the stress. One night, 2 weeks after their first session, they sat on the couch, legs curled beneath them, watching an old movie they used to love. Carrie leaned her head on Kevin's shoulder. I miss this, she whispered. He kissed the top of her head. Me too. She hesitated before speaking again. Do you ever think about that night, about what I did? Kevin held her a little closer. I think about what led to it, not the moment itself. You were overwhelmed, you were scared, and I wasn't helping you see the truth. It still terrifies me, she admitted. That means you're healing, he replied. It means you're learning from it. She closed her eyes. His warmth settled around her like a blanket. We almost lost each other, she whispered. Kevin exhaled, voice soft. We didn't. We stumbled, hard, but we didn't lose this. He cupped her cheek gently, tilting her face toward his. Their lips met. Not desperately, not painfully, but with renewed tenderness. We're rebuilding, he murmured between kisses. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I love you. I love you too, he whispered. 2 weeks later, Carrie attended a formal review with courthouse officials. She wore a navy suit and kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart pounded as they reviewed statements, timelines, and Kevin's testimony. But Kevin's honesty saved her. His insistence that it was an accident saved her. And her own record, years of ethical, compassionate service, spoke louder than the fear of a single moment. Carrie, one of the senior judges, said gently, this was emotional distress, not malice. We're placing a temporary wellness requirement, but you'll keep your position. She inhaled deeply, relief washing through her. Thank you, she whispered. When she left the building, she texted Kevin a single message. Approved. I'm coming home. He replied instantly. Dinner's waiting. So am I. That night, sitting at their dining table, Carrie took Kevin's hands in hers and breathed deeply. We're different people now, she said softly. But I think we're stronger. Kevin nodded. We are. Because now we're honest, not perfect. Honest. She smiled slightly. I like honest better. He laughed under his breath. Me too. They leaned in, their foreheads touching. No secrets, no guessing, no fear, only a quiet promise. We lost our way, but we found each other again. And for Carrie, that was enough. For once, enough was everything. The days following the incident moved quietly, like pages turning in a book no one was ready to read. Carrie awoke each morning with a heaviness in her chest, the memory of that night returning before she had time to brace herself. She wasn't arrested, but the courthouse had placed her on temporary leave while officials reviewed what happened. She understood. Judges were held to high standards. The law wasn't only about verdicts, it was about conduct, character, composure. She respected the system. She had built her life around integrity, and now she felt like she had cracked the foundation she had spent years constructing. Kevin, meanwhile, stayed home to recover. His cuts were healing quickly, but the emotional toll lingered beneath his calm demeanor. He didn't blame Kari, but he also didn't ignore the weight of what they had gone through. He knew healing required more than a few quiet apologies and soft reassurances. Healing required honesty, consistency, and patience. On the first morning after the incident, Carrie stood in the kitchen, staring at the cup of coffee she'd poured, but couldn't bring herself to drink. Her hands were cold. Her heartbeat felt uneven. The apartment, once familiar, now felt full of echoes. Kevin walked in slowly, his arm wrapped in fresh bandages. His steps were gentle, as if he didn't want the floorboards to make a sound that might unsettle her. "You slept on the couch again," he said softly. "I didn't want to crowd you," Carrie replied without looking up. He stepped closer. "You don't crowd me." She lifted her eyes. They were tired, afraid, and full of guilt. "I hurt you," she whispered. "Accidentally," he reminded her. "And because you thought you were losing me." "It explains it," he corrected gently. Carrie swallowed hard, emotions tightening her throat. "Kevin, I don't know how to look at myself the same way right now." He didn't interrupt. "I'm supposed to represent logic," she continued. "Fairness, emotional control. And look what I did." "You're human," he said simply, "but judges can't afford to be just human." He stepped forward, placing a hand on the counter near hers, not touching but close enough she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You've spent years being composed for everyone else," he said, voice steady. "At some point, something was bound to break, and because you didn't have space to fall apart safely, it happened in the worst possible way." Her eyes watered. "I'm ashamed." He shook his head slowly. "You're hurting. Shame doesn't help you heal." She looked away. Kevin inhaled deeply. "We can fix this, but we can't do it alone." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "We need help," he said. "Professional help. Together." Carrie stared at him, surprised. Kevin wasn't against therapy, but he usually believed they could navigate things on their own. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "We've both been walking around with our own fears and exhaustion, and neither of us has been saying it out loud. We need someone to help us untangle this, to help us learn to talk honestly again." Kari exhaled slowly. "You think counseling would make a difference?" "I think communication will," he replied. "Counseling is just the room it happens in." His certainty eased something in her chest. She nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." 3 days later, they found themselves sitting in a softly lit office with muted colors and comfortable chairs. A licensed counselor named Dr. Eliana Warren greeted them with warm eyes and a calm confidence that made Carrie's shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. They sat side by side on a couch, close but not touching. The space between them symbolized everything they were trying to repair. "Why are you here?" Dr. Warren asked gently. Carrie lowered her gaze. Kevin glanced at her, then spoke first. "Because we love each other," he said. "But we stopped being honest with each other." Carrie nodded, voice trembling. "And because I reacted terribly when I thought he was betraying me." Dr. Warren didn't flinch at that. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. "Tell me what made you believe he was," Carrie explained, haltingly at first, then with growing clarity. "The underwear, the jewelry box, the carpet, the late nights, the secrecy, the fear that built up piece by piece." "I didn't want to believe the worst," she whispered, "but everything felt like a warning, and I felt like I was fading from his life." Kevin listened quietly, his hands woven together in his lap. "And Kevin," Dr. Warren asked softly, "why weren't you more open?" He swallowed. "I thought I was protecting her. I didn't want to overwhelm her when her workload was already crushing. I didn't want to burden her with my stress, my insecurities, my plans. Carrie frowned. Your insecurities? He nodded slowly. You're this incredibly respected judge. Everyone looks up to you. And sometimes I feel small next to you, like I'm not as important, like my fears aren't worth mentioning. Carrie's eyes widened. Kevin, you never said that. I didn't want you to think less of me. She reached for his hand without thinking. You're the brightest part of my life. The last thing I would do is think less of you. Kevin's shoulders sagged with relief. Dr. Warren nodded approvingly. You're both speaking honestly now. That's good. But then she addressed Carrie directly. What were you afraid of most? Carrie looked down. Her voice came out soft but devastating in its vulnerability, losing him without warning. Kevin's eyes softened, tears gathering faintly. And what was your fear, Dr. Warren asked, looking at Kevin, when you kept things quiet? That I would disappoint her, he answered. 2 fears, 2 different languages, both carving space between them. Dr. Warren leaned back. You weren't hurting each other intentionally, but you were hurting each other silently. Carrie's breath hitched. She squeezed Kevin's hand tighter. For the first time in weeks, they looked at each other without tension, only understanding. Over the next several weeks, counseling sessions became a routine. Not a punishment, not a chore, but a lifeline. They talked about expectations, about pressures Carrie never voiced, about insecurities Kevin never admitted, about how silence is not comfort, silence is distance. At home, they began practicing small changes. Kevin stopped stepping away to answer calls. Carrie stopped carrying courtroom composure into their personal life. They cooked together, something they hadn't done in months. They shared details about their days instead of glossing over the stress. They began leaving notes for each other on the fridge, gentle reminders of affection. One night, 2 weeks after their first session, they sat on the couch, legs curled beneath them, watching an old movie they used to love. Carrie leaned her head on Kevin's shoulder. I miss this, she whispered. He kissed the top of her head. Me too. She hesitated before speaking again. Do you ever think about that night, about what I did? Kevin held her a little closer. I think about what led to it, not the moment itself. You were overwhelmed. You were scared. And I wasn't helping you see the truth. It still terrifies me, she admitted. That means you're healing, he replied. It means you're learning from it. She closed her eyes. His warmth settled around her like a blanket. We almost lost each other, she whispered. Kevin exhaled, voice soft. We didn't. We stumbled, hard. But we didn't lose this. He cupped her cheek gently, tilting her face toward his. Their lips met, not desperately, not painfully, but with renewed tenderness. We're rebuilding, he murmured between kisses. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I love you. I love you too, he whispered. 2 weeks later, Carrie attended a formal review with courthouse officials. She wore a navy suit and kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart pounded as they reviewed statements, timelines, and Kevin's testimony. But Kevin's honesty saved her. His insistence that it was an accident saved her. And her own record, years of ethical, compassionate service, spoke louder than the fear of a single moment. Carrie, one of the senior judges, said gently, this was emotional distress, not malice. We're placing a temporary wellness requirement, but you'll keep your position. She inhaled deeply, relief washing through her. Thank you, she whispered. When she left the building, she texted Kevin a single message. Approved. I'm coming home, he replied instantly. Dinner's waiting. So am I. Kevin nodded. We are. Because now we're honest. Not perfect. Honest. She smiled slightly. I like honest better. He laughed under his breath. Me too. They leaned in, their foreheads touching. No secrets, no guessing, no fear, only a quiet promise. We lost our way, but we found each other again. And for Carrie, that was enough. For once, enough was everything. People often imagine life-changing moments arriving with clear signs, raised voices, shocking confessions, explosive truths. But Carrie learned that life rarely works that way. Often it's the quiet misunderstandings, the small missteps, the soft, unnoticed cracks that lead two people into a place they never meant to go. When she looked back on the events of the past month, she didn't see a simple story. She saw a complex web of emotion, silence, exhaustion, and fear. She didn't pretend what happened was acceptable. She didn't allow herself an easy excuse, but she finally understood the difference between intention and misunderstanding. She hadn't hurt Kevin because he betrayed her. She had hurt him because she believed he did, and belief, shaped by weeks of stress, missing communication, and fear, can feel as true as fact in the moment. Carrie spent nights sitting on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, replaying every moment in her mind. Not to punish herself, but to truly understand it. Each detail took on new meaning now that the truth had been revealed. The underwear in his car, a prank she mistook for evidence. The jewelry box, a gift she assumed was meant for someone else. The strong scent of cleaner on the carpet, a rushed attempt to fix a spill she interpreted as a cover-up. The late-night calls, conversations with team members she thought were secret exchanges with another woman. Every piece pointed her toward a conclusion she feared most, yet none of it was true. What she believed was betrayal was actually a cluster of poorly timed misunderstandings mixed with the pressure neither of them talked about. Their marriage wasn't falling apart because Kevin was unfaithful. It was straining because they had stopped sharing their inner worlds. He was drowning in insecurity he never voiced. She was carrying pressure she never acknowledged. Both were trying to protect each other, and in doing so, both created the very distance that made everything look suspicious. Carrie used to view relationships like she viewed cases, built on facts, clarity, consistency. But she learned something humbling. Even the smartest people can misread what they see when they're hurting. Fear fills in the blanks with the worst possible answer. Silence gives fear the room to grow. Exhaustion makes every small doubt look like proof. And love, real everyday love, can get tangled in all of it. Carrie knew that some people would judge her harshly if they ever learned the full story. She was a judge after all, someone trained to evaluate evidence, not react emotionally. But she also knew something deeper now. Titles don't erase humanity. Even people who hold authority, who guide others, who are seen as composed and controlled, can break under enough weight. The difference is what they choose to do afterward. She didn't bury what happened. She didn't deny it. She chose to understand it. In counseling, Dr. Warren once said, "You didn't fail because you fell. You fail only if you refuse to get back up." Those words stayed with Kari. She didn't want to run from the truth. She wanted to grow from it. And the truth was this: she had mistaken signs of stress for signs of betrayal. She had mistaken silence for deception. She had mistaken her own fear for reality. What she experienced wasn't Kevin drifting away. It was both of them carrying their burdens alone. It wasn't disloyalty. It was disconnection. The moment she realized that, she felt something shift, like a knot inside her chest had loosened for the first time. Kevin felt it too. One evening, sitting beside her on the couch with his hand resting lightly over hers, he said quietly, "We didn't break. We bent." She looked at him, eyes soft. We bent almost to the point of snapping. Love hadn't prevented mistakes. Love hadn't kept them perfectly aligned, but love had kept them willing to try again. And that was worth everything. When Carrie returned to the courthouse, still on reduced duties, still under wellness supervision, she found that her perspective had changed drastically. She entered the courtroom with the same authority as always, but now her insight was more layered, more compassionate. When she looked at couples in disputes, she didn't just see anger, she saw fear. When she listened to defendants explaining their actions, she recognized exhaustion. When she watched families argue, she saw the hurt beneath every sharp word. Human beings don't fall apart because they're broken. They fall apart because something inside them becomes too heavy to carry alone. Kari understood that better than ever. She also understood the delicate balance love required, not constant harmony, not perfection, but presence, effort, honest conversation even when it's uncomfortable. Every night when she returned home, she felt grateful for Kevin in a way she hadn't felt in years. They talked, really talked, while sitting at the table or walking through the neighborhood. They asked questions instead of assuming answers. They checked in with each other emotionally, not just logistically. One night she turned to him and said softly, "What happened? It was awful, but it taught me things I never would have learned otherwise." "What did it teach you?" he asked. "That love breaks when communication does," she said, "and that assumptions are the quickest way to destroy something good." He nodded, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. And it taught me that hiding my insecurities doesn't protect you. It only creates distance. She leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing steadily. It wasn't betrayal. No, he agreed. It was misunderstanding. Painful, messy, complicated misunderstanding. But we made it through. Carrie closed her eyes. I'm glad we did. So am I, he whispered. It wasn't the dramatic ending she once imagined. It wasn't a triumphant moment of perfection. It was something quieter, steadier, and far more meaningful. An understanding of what their love truly was, and what it absolutely wasn't. It wasn't flawless. It wasn't effortless. It wasn't immune to fear. It wasn't protected by silence. But it was real, and real love, honest, imperfect, resilient love, is worth rebuilding, no matter how many times it stumbles. Autumn arrived quietly in New York, carrying cool winds that brushed through the city like a reminder that even the busiest places knew how to slow down. Leaves collected along sidewalks, swirling in soft bursts of gold and rust whenever a taxi sped past. The air carried that familiar crispness, the kind that invited both reflection and renewal. By mid-October, Carrie found herself standing on the rooftop garden of a building downtown. The space was wide, peaceful, framed by planter boxes overflowing with late-season herbs, and sturdy evergreens that refused to bow to the cold. From here, the city looked both infinite and strangely small. Kevin was on the far side of the roof, a handful of cans of spray paint resting at his feet. His latest mural stretched across the concrete wall, still unfinished, still full of possibility. He had been working on it for weeks, layering outlines with vibrant swaths of color, adding subtle touches that only revealed themselves when you stood close. Carrie watched him for a moment, her hands tucked into her coat pockets. He wore an old hoodie splattered with faded streaks of blue, green, and orange. His hair fell over his forehead the way it always did when he was focused. He hummed as he worked, soft, tuneless, but soothing. She let a smile form, warm and small. There was a time not long ago when watching him from a distance filled her with anxiety. A time when she questioned everything she saw and everything she didn't. But now the sight of him, steady, creative, present, brought comfort instead of fear. As if sensing her presence, Kevin turned. His face lit up instantly. Hey, he said, lowering the can in his hand. You made it. Of course I did. He wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward her, the faint scent of paint trailing behind him. When he reached her, he leaned down and kissed her cheek gently. You okay? He asked. She nodded. Better than okay. Good, he said softly. Come here. I want to show you something. He took her hand and led her across the rooftop to the mural. Carrie stopped a few feet away, her breath catching slightly as she took in the full view. Two figures stood in the center of the painting, holding hands. Not perfectly drawn, not meant to be. Their outlines were loose and expressive, filled with streaks of color blending into one another. Around them swirled clouds of deep navy, charcoal, and muted silver. But beyond the storm-like shapes, warm light broke through, soft yellows, pinks, and white that seemed to glow even in the natural light. It's us, she said quietly. Kevin smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, I wanted to capture everything, not just the good parts. She stepped forward, her eyes traveling across the details. The figures stood close, their bodies angled not away from the storm, but toward the light. You painted the tension, she murmured, the fear, the confusion. Her voice softened. But the light, too. The light is the important part, he said, because no matter how dark things got, we didn't stay there. Carrie's throat tightened, not painfully, but with a kind of emotional fullness she hadn't felt in a long time. She reached up and traced a finger gently along one of the painted rays. She whispered, This is beautiful. Kevin stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. You helped me design it, he said. She blinked. I did. Not literally, he chuckled, but everything we went through, the questions, the counseling, the late-night conversations, it all shaped it. I painted our storm, but also our way out of it. Carrie leaned back into him, letting the wind brush her hair. The city hummed below them, but up here everything felt still. Thank you, she said. He kissed the side of her head. For what? For staying, she whispered. For not giving up. For letting me learn, really learn, what we needed to fix. He turned her gently so they were face to face. His eyes were tender, steady. We both stayed. We both fought for this, and I'm proud of us. She held his gaze for a long moment. I'm proud of us too. He brushed his thumb along her jaw. You know, I kept thinking about everything we've survived, and I realized something. What's that? Our story isn't defined by one night. It's defined by how we came back from it. Carrie felt her eyes sting with emotion, but this time she didn't mind. Not all tears were painful. Some were just releases, soft, reminders of how far she had come. I used to think love was about doing everything right, she admitted, but I get it now. It's about learning. It's about forgiveness. It's about choosing each other again after the hard moments. Kevin nodded, and not letting fear be louder than truth. Exactly. They stood together in silence, their hands intertwined, watching the sunlight reflect off the painted figures on the wall. The mural captured a truth they had lived through, how easy it was to get lost in assumptions, how deeply fear could distort reality, and how much courage it took to rebuild something fragile but worth saving. Carrie rested her head against his chest. I love you, she whispered. He held her closer. I love you too. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but honestly, the kind of honesty born from mistakes, reflection, and growth. After a moment, Kevin pulled back slightly. Come with me, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Where? He walked backward toward the small table near the edge of the roof. On it sat 2 mugs of warm cider, a blanket, and a sketchbook. I want to show you the next idea I'm working on, she smiled, feeling warmth settle in her chest. Another mural? Maybe, he said, taking her hand again. Or maybe something else, but whatever it is, I want us to create it together this time. She squeezed his hand. I'd like that. They sat down together at the table. The rooftop garden rustled softly with the wind. The city lights blinked awake one by one as the sun began its descent. Carrie pulled the blanket over their legs and leaned against Kevin's shoulder while he flipped open the sketchbook. As he talked, animated, passionate, hopeful, she listened with a quiet peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Paint smudges marked his fingertips. Soft lines of laughter creased the corners of his eyes. This was the man she loved, the man she had nearly lost to fear, the man who refused to give up on them even when things felt impossible, and she was grateful, deeply, sincerely grateful, that she hadn't lost him. At one point, Kevin paused, pencil hovering loosely in his hand. What? She asked. He smiled at her, gentle and full of affection. I'm glad you're here with me. She kissed him softly. I'm glad too. Above them, the sky shifted from soft gold to pale lavender. Below them, the city pulsed with life. Around them, the mural glowed with meaning, an unspoken promise that storms could be survived, that love could be rebuilt.